Hello and welcome. So, High Potential, at least the American version, has developed a great balance of pre-streaming style episodic narrative and post-streaming short attention span theater seasonal arcs. While the basic premise is driven by an ongoing investigation into the disappearance of lead character Morgan Guillory's husband, Season 1 managed to avoid the trap, that has hamstrung a lot of television drama, especially genre series, which is a seasonal big bad that must have some connection to every freaking episode of the season, or at least half of them. That's a video of its own, by the way. This video requires an adjustment to the usual disclaimer. Potential spoiler alert for Season 2, but definite spoiler alert for the Season 1 finale, and lots of them. If you aren't caught up, take care of that before watching any further. All right. Taking all of that preamble into consideration, the first season finale continued the irresistibly taut and twisting storytelling, but this time in unexpected arch nemesis territory. I've been hooked on this series from the first promotional YouTube clip ABC posted, but this new development has me invested even more deeply. If the setup's any indication, I have no doubt the continued story of this adversary will be blended seamlessly into the second season. The series hasn't given him a name yet, so I will coin the Gamester. Easier than going through the video exhausting the thesaurus supply of synonyms for opponent. That nickname, codename, nom de crime, might seem a little grandiose, comic bookish even, but there are good reasons for such comparison, especially connected to the world's greatest detective, as DC Comics claims. And that is my jump-off point for this deep dive. From the premiere, the series has had connections to previous comics-related programs, particularly DC Comics, although the created for television by credit on High Potential is held by Drew Goddard, who has basically the same credit on the Netflix version of Marvel's Daredevil. Okay, tangentially, although I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not sure when or if I will, I am aware that High Potential is based on an original French television series, but I'm not going anywhere near those associated rights and credits, etc. for this. Also, among the superb cast are two actors who had roles in the CW vs. Batwoman series. Judy Reyes had a brief but brilliant recurring role in the third season as the Joker's former gimmick engineer, while Javicia Leslie played the title character in the last two of the three seasons. Daniel Sunjata had a part in The Dark Knight Rises. Now, I'm not suggesting at all that the comic book connection of past roles influenced their casting in High Potential. But these are just the sort of obscure details that Morgan Guillory uses to find the truth in each week's episode. Getting into this episode specifically starts a little differently from the standard procedural, and that there's no murder of the week cold open. There's not even a hint of a crime until after a comic relief slice of life with Morgan's family as her daughter Ava prepares for her driver's license test. That carries Morgan into the start of her day at the station. A big social event for the department's announced. It's an unmistakable Chekhov's gun. After we're lulled into a comfortable sense of comedy, an enigmatic email to Major Crimes starts the clock ticking on a marathon of multiple unsettling and life-threatening abductions. The unsettling factor is the criminal's use of games and or puzzles as both clues and challenges to the detectives. And here is the first comic book trope, the lunatic with a signature quirk. This will actually be mentioned outright later in the episode, but I don't want to skip ahead. Although, skipping ahead occurs later within the story itself, as a matter of fact. The initial emailed challenge requires the team to build a puzzle, which reveals a map, taking them to a hiking trail, or they find cards from Loco Ocho, guiding them to a particular path, leading to a hopscotch court marked to create a math problem. There's that skipping ahead. The solution to that provides direction and elevation to aim nearby sightseeing binoculars at the storage facility where the first victim is hidden. Oh, and that victim is diabetic. So the timing of his necessary medication builds in the countdown for this match. The team does manage to rescue the victim, Spencer Wallace, who is able to give them their first clues, although not all are directly or immediately recognized. Speaking of which, if anyone connected to the show happens to watch this, who is Cameron Rogers? This otherwise unseen person is shown in a photo on the murder board with an arrow towards one of hapless Spencer before any other leads are mentioned. Was a scene or three cut for time? Here I feel I should point out the main differences so far, preventing this episode from being a Saw homage. First, the games are mainly standard old-fashioned family games rather than the elaborately tortuous and torturous machinations of Jigsaw. Second, is not as definite. Jigsaw chose his victims by a twisted altruism, giving them the opportunity to atone for behavior that had harmed others. So far, the gamester seems to have chosen players randomly, albeit through elaborate charades of his own. I'll admit the mask worn by the gamester is a pretty apparent nod to Jigsaw, but I think that's intended ironically, considering the context of the only time we see it. Third, related to that context, the games are directed at the police, the victims being pawns, as opposed to Jigsaw's playmates being the active participants, with the police generally involved only by the demands of their duty. Tangentially, again, in spite of the terrifyingly, thoroughly thought out and convoluted contest concocted by the gamester, their unexplained motivation also keeps us out of the Vincent Price cinema of vengeance. And back to the story. Story-wise, Karadec does mention that they should be looking for someone with a grudge against the police, but Morgan dismisses that theory. Honestly, by the end of the episode, that still is not clear. Later, while picking up takeout, Morgan has an unexpected encounter with Geo Conforth, the shady gentleman who has offered police otherwise inaccessible information on the case of her missing husband. As that tense but productive meeting ends, the camera shifts to an outdoor angle that feels uncomfortably point of view. The next morning, Daphne arrives at the station to find an inexplicably driven Oz already at work on the case. She soon gets a phone call suggesting that new clues have been found at the venue where the impending police gala is to be held. The hammer's cocked on that Chekhov's gun. As Morgan arrives last at the venue, she receives a call from long-distance boyfriend Tom, who has also been invited to a gala. Having worked at the police station, they plan to meet there. An antique baby carriage awkwardly overloaded with 3 creepy baby dolls has been arranged in the entrance to the ballroom. Among the figures are placed Scrabble racks containing letter tiles spelling out, "The fun has just begun." From the setup, Morgan realizes that the perpetrator has been watching them. Dun dun! Back at HQ, Oz confesses a personal connection to the case. Following the death of his father a year previous, he began attending a grief support group. Since work had kept him from being a regular there, he hadn't immediately recognized that Spencer Wallace was another member. Realizing the possibility that the gamester could be a member as well, Oz and Daphne go to interview the rest of the group. A potential lead is discovered, a former member, David, who had been increasingly obsessed with games. Unfortunately, the duo also learn of a possible new victim, a group member who's usually early still hasn't arrived by the time the questioning has wrapped up. Morgan and Karadec find evidence at that missing woman's home confirming her abduction. Morgan finds that the dolls are a clue to a location, and paintings at that site, various international versions of the game Jacks, give Morgan the combination that opens the safe in which the victim is trapped. Back at the station, Karadec asks Morgan about her father, who she had mentioned while figuring out the clue of the Jacks. It turns out that she inherited her high potential intellect from her dad, but his attitude about the ability is a lot more highfalutin than hers, and this has led them to not speaking apparently for years. Very next scene, Morgan gets home to find that her kids and more recent baby daddy Ludo have shopped for her gala outfit. Away from the children, she confides in Ludo that the kidnapper is kind of brilliant. Ludo counters that so is she. But her concern is that she doesn't know how to think like somebody who would do all this. Karadec gets a visit from his FBI agent ex-partner, who gives some new information on Morgan's missing previous baby daddy, Roman. Oz is about to head to the gala when he starts his car. The steering wheel airbag deploys, knocking him unconscious, as they do. Then we see the masked gamester peer into the passenger side window. This is that Saw context I mentioned, based on the disturbingly high number of law enforcement personnel who ended up, spoiler alert, working with Jigsaw. No worries, that's not happening here, that we know of. At the gala, Daphne, more annoyed than worried, says she's going to call the tardy Oz. Karadec relays to Lieutenant Soto his news about the Roman investigation. After sunset, Daphne tells Soto that she still hasn't been able to reach Oz and is concerned enough that she's going to his nearby apartment to check on him. Karadec dances with Morgan and recounts their partnership, during which he actually refers to the gamester as this Joker wannabe. He then convinces Morgan to let him deal with Geo Conforth from now on. Boyfriend Tom arrives and finally gets his chance to dance with Morgan. Daphne discovers Oz's car, but no Oz. His tie is draped over the rearview mirror, and on the driver's seat is an hourglass, wrapped in a note that says only, Marco. With this newly personal connection, the team becomes even more focused. Daphne realizes that the fonts used in all the previous game challenge notes are different, from which Morgan deduces that the acrostic formed by the font names is a famous architect who only designed a single LA house with a pool, the one that belongs to the family of game-obsessed grief group member David. They race there and save Oz seconds from drowning. Later, as he recovers, Oz relates to Morgan that one of his first cases on the force involved an 8-year-old girl saved from drowning at the last minute. Next morning, Karadec confronts Geo Conforth, unintentionally waking the Hood's young son. Geo is furious at the danger Karadec has put him in, but does give the detective the information he dug up on Roman. Morgan is packing up the car after a grocery run with her kids when a friendly stranger offers to take her cart back for her. Putting the purchases away home, her son hands Morgan a preschool-aged card game he finds among the groceries. At the station, the rest of the team learned that the prime suspect David Roy Peck is currently on lockdown in a upstate New York rehab facility and has been for the past 4 months. Morgan, back at home, looks at the card game and finds a smiley face sticker that also reads, "You're the one, Morgan. We shall play again, me and you." At that moment, her phone rings and it's Karadec, who tells her that he knows Roman is alive and where he is. Intercut in these scenes are the flashbacks of the hippie-ishly hirsute figure thought to be David, surreptitiously observing the team, especially Morgan, all along. as well as his cutting his hair and shaving his beard to reveal, finally, that friendly grocery store stranger, the gamester. Which reminds me, before I tackle the speculation, spoilers, and suggestions, I should get my game face on. Just a sec. Oh, that's better. So, in the finale, the surprise-ish last-minute appearance of the previously unseen adversary is limited to what amounts to an extended cameo by the once and future, possibly, star of a Grimm, David Giuntoli. The necessity of keeping his identity secret requires that his brief interaction with Caitlin Olsen's Morgan be innocently innocuous, while this sadly deprives him of the standard Oscar/Emmy nomination scene, full tilt Mimsy meltdown monologue we would expect, or at least hope for, from such a villain. His expression and the look in his eyes when we see his clean-shaven reveal promises that we will get the goods in a future episode. How many seasons in the future? Who can say? While I hope the series runs for as long as the creators are satisfied with it, given the precarious and indefinite nature of network programming, they might not want to extend the story arc beyond the certain second season, at the risk of not getting to resolve it at all. Sorry, not sorry for the virtually verbatim recap of the episode, but this one was so full of foreshadowing that it seemed more effective than trying to backtrack in explaining each instance. In fact, some hints dropped aren't necessarily connected directly to the gamester storyline, although they are still somewhat in line with the comic book trope theory. First, having initially complimented the writers for avoiding the seasonal big bad, it does appear that they've set themselves up with two major storylines for season 2. One, Roman's return with whatever persisting dangers that includes, and 2, the enduring threat of the gamester. In an old-timey television season of 20 or more episodes, this would be no issue, but in the post-streaming world of 8 to 13 episodes maximum, the writers have set themselves a challenge worthy of the show's nemesis. Of course, these two plot threads will inevitably become entangled anyway. Dun dun! I'll first say that I guessed Roman was likely in some version of witness protection by the middle of the second episode, but I still have no idea of the reasons or persons behind the situation. I do believe, know even, that those reasons and persons are still in active danger to Roman, his family, and eventually the major crimes team. But they are not the only ones at risk, and they won't be the first casualties in the ordeal. I expect that Geo Conforth was not exaggerating the position that Karadek's visit placed him in. Geo is going to be found by the people who killed FBI agent Lila Byrne, resulting in his death, or at least extended hospitalization, leading to, comic book trope, his son ending up in the temporary custody of Adam Karadek. Now hear me out. During the run of the first season, we've been repeatedly shown what a neat freak, bordering on OCD, that Karadek is. In this season finale, we're shown his immaculate high-end apartment and are introduced with him to Geo Conforth's preteen son. To me, that combination pretty much screams foreshadowing. Roman is undoubtedly going to be found and returned home. This could make for telenovela-level drama, considering Morgan has always believed Roman was alive and did not leave by choice, but has been with Ludo and now in a relationship with Tom in the meantime. And what about Adam? I'm expecting that the partnership with Morgan that Adam admits to, in a scene already bursting with subtext, will deepen while she helps him navigate the foster father role. As a one-off speculation, I'm predicting that Ava's recently licensed driving capability will play a crucial part in a season 2 episode. Whether connected to either of these ongoing story arcs or unrelated, I don't know. In the course of investigating the gamester, Morgan and the team will be forced to recruit her father. Her HPI may not help her think like the gamester, but her dispassionate dad may not be as limited. Narratively, it would be interesting if this happens after Roman has been found, and possibly also during a surprise visit by Tom. Tangentially, I'm still on the fence as to whether or not the gamester is also HPI or just plain nuts. As for Gamester's motives, Karadic's original thought of someone with a grudge against the police has some merit. That Oz was put in a situation so similar to one he had encountered as a rookie is beyond coincidental. Combined with Gamester's knowledge of the real David Roy Peck and his family, means that besides his own uncanny intelligence, he obviously has access to information that is beyond your standard Google search. Whether he always intended to involve the police or pivoted there after having no luck with Spencer Wallace, then just happened to discover a worthy opponent in Morgan, that feels far too random for such a meticulous mastermind. But there doesn't seem to be a premeditated long-range plan to get to Morgan either. It does occur to me that I could be gaslighted by the writers, that the Roman and Gamester storylines are actually connected already, but that would take several feats of narrative sleight of hand. Going back to another of Karadic's offhand comments takes me to what would probably be the second season finale. This Joker wannabe. Daniel Sanjata was in a Christopher Nolan Batman film. Not the one with the Joker, but he does have the connection. In Nolan's The Dark Knight, Joker's cruelest act was putting two people important to Batman in mortal danger and forcing him to choose between them. I think the gamester is going to do the same thing to Morgan with Roman and Tom. What the outcome of that test will be, I can't even speculate. Especially since it could be complicated by the probable developments between Morgan and Adam. Dun dun. Speculation wrapped. Suggestions? Don't have an immediate romantic relationship between Daphne and Oz. I'm not against it outright, by any means. They're adorable. But right after she saves his life is kind of heavy-handed and ill-advised. That, finally, is all. If you've watched all the way through, the algorithm and I appreciate it. Comments, likes, and subscribes are even more appreciated. Thanks for your time. Stop back again.